for us here at Dynamic, continuing on our Dynamic speaker series. Very excited, very grateful, very lucky to be talking today to our friends at ARRI. Going to be having a discussion about lots of different things, mostly in a Q&A form, just learning more about full format, full frame, cameras, lenses, understanding it from two of the industry's best, and just really excited to be continuing having these conversations. We've had lots of engagement and an increase in engagement from our YouTube and Facebook channels. So if you guys are joining in, you are being noticed, and we appreciate all of your thoughtful questions and showing up and engaging with us, because you know, this is an opportunity for everybody to learn. And you know, I know specifically for our team, we've learned and gotten to know our clients, our vendors, our manufacturers so much through this process. And it's really been a phenomenal opportunity for everybody. You know, wanted to welcome back for us Günter, who gave us an internal presentation, which was phenomenal for our team. Günter's the senior, he's in charge of technical sales at ARRI, and we're very excited to have him back and be broadcasting, you know, more of our kind of conversation that we had internally on a live format, so you guys can listen in and ask questions. And then he's also joined by Art. Art's a cinema lens specialist at ARRI. He's here in Burbank, which is where Brandon and I are today, and Günter's out in New York. So we're all very excited. So just a quick you know, intro from the Dynamic team. My name's Austin Rios. I am the president of Dynamic Rentals. I'm joined by the rest of our team, the executive team, being Brandon Zachary, our CEO, Tom Smith, our head of sales, who's been a great benefit for us while we're kind of doing these things, talking to people, all the Zoom calls. And we were just kind of having a quick internal discussion before we started here about being able to connect more people. And this has been such a great opportunity to reach a broader audience. And so I'm sure some of the US team has started to see much more of Tom. So we're very excited about that. Same goes to Sean Sims. Sean is our Chief Technology Officer. He's the guy that asks all of our guests the tough questions. So Günter and Art, sharpen your pencils. Yeah, we're excited to learn more and see what we can uncover today. And then Anna Schmidt, who is our Director of Marketing, who makes this whole thing happen, who gets everybody together. We're excited to have her on. Of course, she'll be kind of interacting with the audience on the live channels on YouTube and Facebook. And Coda, our senior tech in Atlanta, who's in the office today and is putting out orders and fixing equipment and doing everything that we can to maintain all of our latest and greatest ARRI gear. So yeah, we're very excited. Wanted to hand it over to the ARRI team to just kind of discuss a little bit. There's probably going to be some things that are repetitive that we talk about, that if you guys are, you know, consistently following ARRI's channels or our channels, some of it might be redundant, but there's also some new stuff in here that we're excited to talk about that hasn't been shared and is exciting. And so yeah, so Günter, if you'd like to kind of take it away, that'd be great.
Thanks, Austin. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having us on today. So between Art and myself, we're going to try to do this on a more free-form level. Even though we have slides that we can share, Art has recently shot some new material also, because when we talk about large format in general, it's a visual experience. It's something that you can explain technically, but it's always more convincing when you have examples. And yeah, so for myself, I have been with ARRI since the beginning when the Alexa came out. And just last week, we had a presentation that Mark Shipman-Müller did in Munich through our ARRI Tech Talks, where he had a half-hour presentation of 10 years Alexa. And it was quite incredible to see how many changes were happening over these 10 years. I mean, hindsight, things look so much clearer, but when you're in the middle of it, things are sometimes not so happening so easily. Nevertheless, it's quite amazing that the Alexa Mini LF is the last one of the Alexa series using the same sensor technology that has been developed basically for the classic Alexa. And if I would ask any of my colleagues if they would have predicted that this sensor would survive 10 years, I don't think anyone would have dared to predict this. So Art, do you want to chime in about lenses? Because large format is also comes along with a new set of lenses. So we developed the ARRI signature primes, which together with the Alexa LF and the Mini LF, they are a whole system that goes hand in hand and provides quite some advantages over using existing lenses, which you can.
Thank you, Günter. I feel like you just handed over to me in a very professional manner. Thank you. Yeah, the signature primes are they're very different lenses for ARRI. I think they're really, really interesting. In the past, ARRI's really gone for very clean, pristine lenses, because most of our lenses were made for film, and film is an analog medium. It's got grain, it's got gate weave. There's a lot going on that kind of gets in the way of a really clear image. So you could make really crisp, clean lenses in order to get the best image possible on film. And now that we've gone to digital, I think there was a movement for quite a while where people were kind of missing the abstraction of film and trying to find a way to bring that back through lenses. Now, as we're moving into UHD and HDR, I'm starting to see a move back, because as display technologies get more immersive, some of the lenses that have been so pleasing in Rec 709 and in film might be a little distracting on a really high resolution, high dynamic range screen. So the idea behind the lenses was to continue with ARRI's, the philosophy of the company is that we make stuff that nobody else either can make or is willing to make, because we're always kind of living at that top edge of what's possible to do. But we also wanted to make lenses that were pleasing in digital. So after a lot of research, we made a number of decisions and made these lenses that we sell as part of our large format system, or we promote as part of our large format system, but it's really in every format system, because we've come out with LPL. LPL is a replacement for the PL mount, which we hope will be widely adopted over time. We're starting to see adoption take off. But the idea is that you can put the same mount on every camera, whether it's large format or Super 35. And that way lenses are portable between formats. Because in the past, if you were shooting 35mm film, you didn't go out and shoot maybe 65mm film the next week. There is a very stratified group of cinematographers who would shoot 65. But now you can bounce between Super 35 and large format day to day. It's not really a big deal anymore. But we wanted to make a set of lenses that could follow you as you did that. And we also wanted to get rid of all the constraints that made PL so difficult to work with in digital, because PL is made for film and it's made for a specific image set, Super 35. We wanted the signature primes to be scalable. I mean, they have plenty of resolution. So if you're shooting with an 8K Super 35 sensor, these lenses will outperform the sensor. But at the same time, there's some artistic stuff backed in there where we really worked on the micro contrasts in skin, so that even though the resolution is there, skin feels a little bit smoother. It doesn't feel crisp like you would expect out of a really, really high performance lens, which these are, but we've done some extra work to make the fine detail feel more natural instead of artificially sharp. And there are also some decisions as far as You know, what kind of glass do we use? You know, we use some very, very sophisticated glass, and there are choices now with the more modern glasses as far as what color those glasses can be. We chose to go with some of the warmer glasses in order to accentuate skin tone a little bit, and, you know, make people look a little bit more, you know, rather not necessarily a full-on neutral look, but just pop skin tone just a little bit. So there's a lot of artistic things that have been backed into these lenses, you know, where a lot of manufacturers will embrace aberrations in order to create a look. We kind of start at the other direction, and we start with a really, really, really great lens, and then we back in some, I guess I should just call it secret sauce, because I can't talk about everything we're doing, but to really finesse the look of the lens. And we feel like this is going to be a really good strategy for the next 10, 15 years as display technologies get better. And we want a pretty lens, but we also want a lens that doesn't necessarily draw attention to itself and say, hey, it's all about me, especially as we see 4K and 8K displays and projection become commonplace.
Absolutely. And I feel like, you know, that seems to be a consistent theme that we've been talking to, you know, lots of manufacturers, and some of the issues or difficulties that they have is, how do we, you know, at what point is the block in technology? Is it on the screen? Is it in the sensor? Is it on the lens? And how do we future proof some of the technology that you're, you know, making now, but at the same time without compromising some of those artistic, you know, artistic qualities kind of that you're mentioning, and that balance, trying to find that balance. And I know, you know, from the group and you know, our belief in those signatures, we've seen quite a bit of increase in popularity, you know, really, you know, as the mini LF came out and that became to be a little bit more accepted, and there were more native LPL mount cameras out there that could, you know, work with these lenses. We saw kind of an increase in opportunity for people to use the lenses and see, you know, their beauty. So definitely, you know, kind of understanding of those concepts and how those things have come together. And certainly it's becoming much more popular for really different rental companies, and obviously their production companies on a global basis. So it's not, you know, it's not, to me, it feels like a movement that's happening beyond each global or each local market. It's really something that's being accepted very, very widely.
Good.
Art, if I may chime in, yeah, I mean, obviously you've created a lens that is specific for the Alexa LPL format, being the lenses are designed with an LPL mount, and goes with probably goes well with the chemistry of the lens. You know, the chemistry of the lens works well with the native sensor on an LPL Alexa, be it a full frame or a mini LF, or Alexa or a mini LF. How would those lenses compare or resolve on any other camera with obviously adapter being a, you know, LPL to PL adapter? Was that ever kind of thought in the design process? Or, I mean, most of the time we see the lenses that go out alongside the ARRI LPL cameras or ARRI Alexas.
Right, they work great. I mean, I've got some examples. They don't show it a ton, but let's see. Let me see if I can find them. But yeah, I mean, they're really designed to be camera agnostic. They're not really meant only for our cameras. Oh, here we go. Let me share my screen real quick. Actually, let me get this going. All right, let's try that one. Okay, so that is, you don't need to see yourselves. Can you see yourselves there? I've got a window with everyone's face in there. Let me try to get rid of that. Okay, so this is the Alexa LF 4.5K open gate, and then that's a Monstro 8K. And it looks, I mean, it looks just fine. I don't see anything in there that tells me that the lens is performing any differently, at least as far as color, and I see tons of resolution. Venice.
While you've got the image on the sort of Monstro app, is the, you know, obviously because we're on an LPL mount, that the circumference is a lot larger, and the minute we put an adapter onto the signature lens, the circumference naturally, because of the economics, becomes smaller. Does that affect the image in any way, the image circle in any way? If I'm expanding myself correctly?
Well, you can't adapt an LPL lens to PL. It's not possible.
No, I'm talking about, so you can't put an LPL to PL mount on a signature prime and then use it on a generic PL mount camera, a third-party camera?
No, because the flange depth is 44 millimeters versus 52 for PL.
Yeah, of course.
And that was part of the plan. All the digital still manufacturers are going to mirrorless designs just because it's
of course.
Yeah, it's a more cost-effective way to make really, really high performance lenses. So there isn't a way to put these on a PL mount camera. You can put PL mount lenses in an LPL mount, but it won't work the other way around.
So would you then be on a Monstro, any other camera, you'd be having to put a LPL mount on the camera to get you 44 flange focal depth? Right.
This is a wooden camera mount.
Thank you. Okay, now I got it. Thank you.
And then this one, I don't know that I don't know if there's going to be an LDS solution that feeds data right into the camera. I don't think wooden camera actually has permission to access that port on the red, but in the Venice they do. And there's new software coming out for the signature prime lenses that will support /i. So if you put this on a Venice, you'll get /i metadata from the lens right into the camera.
Wow.
I'm sorry. Can I ask just kind of a follow-up to Sean's question here? If you were to use the signature primes on a Super 35 camera, obviously LPL mount, it could still be the Venice, but just in Super 35 mode. How do your lenses react to that versus in full frame? Because obviously they were designed for a larger image circle, but then you're using less of that image circle. So in terms of natural fall off, you're kind of using the sweet spot of the lens. Is that something that you wouldn't recommend to people to do and keep it in the full frame world, or?
No, I would say use it for everything. I mean, the focal length works great. The focal length range works great in Super 35. And you're looking through the sweet spot of the lens anyways, because all lenses are going to be better in the center. So
but you would have a crop, wouldn't you, of like 1.47? So the actual focal length will crop. You'd be using the sweet spot of the lens.
Well, yeah, I mean the angle of view would be less. Yeah, and my rule of thumb, actually, let me find that slide, because it's a pretty good rule of thumb. That's this one. So if you have a standard set, so 18, 25, 35, 50, 75, or 85, then to convert from Super 35 to LF for the same angle of view, you just go up to the next standard focal length. So if you're shooting 25 millimeter in Super 35 for LF, and that actually I should say specifically 3.2K on, say, a Mini, because when I was a freelance DP, I almost never shot HD. I would always shoot 3.2 or 3.4K. If you're doing that on a Mini, and 25 millimeter on a Mini would be a 35 millimeter on the Mini LF for the same angle of view. So you just bump up.
That's a great rule of thumb. That's very easy to remember then. Yeah.
Yeah, and the same thing works if you're going from HD to UHD or 3.2K to open gate LF. It'll work. If you're going from HD to UHD, I think it's only 1.2, so it's a much smaller factor. But it's a really interesting effect, because I Like, for example, here's an example of what you might see in 3.2K versus, what you would see on an LF. Same angle of view, different lens. So that's a 47, and that's a 75, same stop. And I love looking at backgrounds with text in them because I can really see how they go out of focus, because at some point I realize, hey, I can't read that so easily. So it becomes a little bit more obvious. But I love this effect. I'm sorry?
Clear depth of field change, yeah.
Yes, and when people talk about the large format look, there's all these different things that they bring into it, like lack of distortion, and that's not really a factor for us because all our lenses are that way. So we don't really see an advantage from, say, going from a 25 to a 35 in terms of distortion. There's not going to be a difference. But this depth of field change, I think, is really significant. And to me, there's a, let's see, I've got an example here. There's a really significant effect. Part of it is the background feels softer, but it also feels closer because everything gets bigger. So there's this interesting sense to me that the background is closer and yet more separate at the same time. And I think that's part of the look. And this works really well in wide shots because I don't think we're used to seeing that. We're really dialed into seeing it in close-ups, but in wide shots, it's a different thing. In this next setup, the foreground and the background, there's like a continuity. It doesn't feel too separate. But now when I go to large format, she feels like she's on a different plane because the background is so soft. And I'm trying to figure this out and quantify this, but there's some sort of crossover point where the background becomes so soft, it does feel like it's almost like a backdrop against which you're photographing a subject. And even this little statue in the foreground is so soft that it feels like it's on a different layer as well. So as best I can tell, that's really the secret of large format, is you've got this difference in depth because our visual system is splitting the scene or the shot into more layers based on the fact that it's considerably less sharp.
I mean, you would classically almost normally try and get on that on a sensor crop. If you were, you were shooting open gate and you wanted to crop inside into sort of a 16:9 sensor, but it would not give you the same feeling.
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, this is what I did with these images. I shot these all on the same camera because I didn't want to move anything. I just made up some 3.2K markings. So I framed up that way. And then I, just brought them into Resolve and made sure they matched as far as image size. There's a little bit of fudging. The focal lengths don't line up exactly, but they're within a couple of millimeters. But what's really interesting, and let me show you some new stuff because people have probably already seen this. I recently noticed that when I compared Super 35 lenses in 3.2K to full open gate images, the backgrounds were softer in large format, even when I matched angles of view, and even when the master prime, because I was testing against master prime because they open up to T1.3. I mean, they're probably the best high-speed Super 35 lenses out there. I would have thought these would have matched more closely, but there's still an advantage in large format, even though we're only looking at T1.8 on a signature prime. The background and foreground roll out of focus more quickly, which is really interesting because I thought they would be a match. I mean, mathematically, they should be more of a match, and they aren't. And then because I got a little freaked out by this and I was worried I was doing something wrong, I tested it a bunch of different ways. Now, the entrance pupil determines the point at which depth of field is measured. And I was worried that maybe the entrance pupil in one of the lenses was far enough forward that when I was shooting a close-up like this, that might throw things off. Even it turned out in the tech specs, it's only about a difference of 1 inch. So I backed off and did another test with a longer lens at a greater distance. And I put in these little chess pieces as an alignment guide. So when I scaled up to 3.2K, I could get it perfectly aligned with the LF image. And there is definitely a difference in depth of field. And once again, the LF, the large format, seems to be softer at 1.8, even though the master prime is at 1.3, which is really interesting. I've not figured out what's going on yet.
Wouldn't you relate that to the fact that the angle of, inside of the angle of view is changing because you're shooting down the sweet spot of the lens, and if your angle of view changes, your circles of confusion change, your factor of confusion changes?
I wouldn't think so. I'm gonna have to think about that. But in theory,
I did warn you that he would ask the tough questions. I just want to throw that out there.
Oh no, that's good. And I've been running all this stuff through PCAM to try to figure out what's going on. And the math, at least according to PCAM, is not as clear cut as I always thought, because I know going from, if you multiply a focal length by 1.4, so say 25 times 1.4 to 35, you lose half your depth of field. The other rule of thumb that I always knew was that if you change the stop by 2 stops in either direction, you're either doubling or halving your depth of field. So if you go from 2 to 4, you now have twice as much depth of field. If you go from 2 to 1, you now have half the depth of field.
Yeah.
But it's not quite as clean cut. So that could be part of the issue, is I'm going to a longer focal length for half the depth of field and then only opening up 1 stop wider on the master prime. So I'm still off by about a stop. But I would have thought that I would be close, and this is still pretty, it's close, but there's a significant difference. So my understanding of the math, I'm not great at math anyways, but every way I look at this, there's something interesting going on. Like, so here's another example. This is the master prime again. I got some sparkly lights around the outside of the frame, and I've got this backlit little tableau rear lit lamp thing in the background. I love shooting fine texture because you can really see how things are going out of focus with fine textures. And then here's the signature prime. And it's interesting, there's a change in geometry here. Signature primes, they're really free of distortion. And it's funny because you don't really realize that there is distortion in other lenses until you compare it to something like this. And it always feels like the background is a little bit farther away on signature primes when I compare them to just about anything else. But you can see the highlights, the little bokeh in the background, the highlight bokeh. It's once again, it's larger on the LF, which is really interesting. And I can see these little mahjong tiles in the foreground, especially this green one that's kind of closer. And actually the one, the red one at the bottom right, it's going softer on the LF. But I focused on that seashell in the bowl, and that's sharp in both shots. And then if I look at this, once again, that picture in the background, you can see on the master prime, it's still a little bit sharper than the LF is. And I can see a little bit more texture. That lamp on the right is not as it's not as soft. And part of this is signature primes are designed to roll out of focus really softly and beautifully. I mean, they're exceptionally well corrected for spherical aberration, which is a big part of that. And then they're also near telecentric. And our product manager had noticed a long time ago that lenses that were near telecentric not only played better with sensors, but there was also this different quality to the bokeh, that it was softer and smoother. So
would that allude to, if you went back to the previous image, when the one bokeh looked more of like a leaf shape to the right, it looks more, I would refer to it more, it's not as, it's the one on the left has got more of a rounder shape, or is that because of the out of focus bokeh? But the one on the right appears to kind of more of a leafy shape to it.
Oh, you're talking about the cat's eye.
Yeah, the cat's eye. There we
Yeah.
go. That's a good interpretation. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that kind of comes down to we're making a large format lens that opens up fairly wide, but we're trying to keep the size small. And
yeah,
that's where the cat's eye comes from. You're kind of giving the ray bundles coming in at the edges of the frame a little bit of a haircut.
Okay, yeah.
And that's not as big of an issue with the Master Prime because it's aiming for a much smaller image circle.
Yeah.
With the LF, we're aiming for a much larger image circle, and if we wanted to make those more round, then the lens would be, the diameter would increase by, I think it's 1.4, and it would very quickly become a larger lens. So that's kind of unavoidable, but we worked really hard to make it as pleasing as we possibly could. And if you close down a stop, that goes away pretty quickly. The other interesting thing about that is so there is a drop off in field illumination that results from that. So it's a little bit of a soft vignette. Mm. What we did is we made that completely consistent across every focal length. Now, normally what you would have is some lenses would have more of that, some lenses would have less of that, and you'd bounce back and forth depending on which lens you were on. And it wouldn't necessarily be linear. Like the 40 might have a really pleasing leafy bokeh, the 58 might be more round, the 75 might be back to the leaf. And we don't really make lenses that vary that much. We really go for consistency. So there's the same soft vignette at wide open on every lens, whether it's the 12 or the 280, and they're designed that way. So yeah, it's just really, and also, oh yeah, I can talk quickly about the color. Signature primes are designed to be a little bit warmer. The glass we chose is meant to pop flesh tone just a little bit. You can sort of see that there. I have some better examples. Let's see, where is that? I went out and shot some stuff at Malibu, and I just kind of did this blind because I wanted to see. I mean, when I shoot lens tests, I almost never know what I'm going to find, and you can't see this when you're shooting in the field. And of course, you can't compare things when you're shooting in the field. So it's it's a little bit tricky. So you just go out and you shoot things and you hope you find something, and I almost always do. Now this is a Master Prime. Master Primes are designed to be dead on color neutral. I mean, I've seen the graphs that show this, and they are perfectly color neutral. Ultra primes tend to be a little bit on the cool side. Master anamorphics, not as cool, but Master primes are kind of right down the middle. But signature primes are designed to be a little warmer. And you can see that here. And you can especially see it if I give you the side-by-side. And what's really interesting is that this isn't necessarily technically correct, but from an artistic standpoint, it's interesting because to me, the sky is just a little bit warmer, and I like this blue more than I like maybe the Master Prime blue. I think the Master Prime blue is more accurate, but it has a very cyan quality. And when I think of the sky, sometimes you see that, but I always feel like the sky is a little bit more of a reddish blue, and that's kind of what I feel in the Signature Prime. So, but if you really like greens to pop natively, and I've done no color correction to this other than just slapping on the default ARRI 709 LUT. The greens pop nicely in the Master Prime, but I feel like the Signature Prime gives me more of a feel, maybe it's less accurate, but it's more of what I remember it looking like because the wood is just a little bit warmer. It's interesting, the Signature Primes really dig into shadows too. You can kind of see in the background, there's a cluster. Let's see if I can get my little laser pointer going. There's a little cluster of trees here, and you see a lot more into the shadows over here. And also,
what are these daisies? These yellow daisies or something have really come to life.
Yes, and that's really interesting because they really pop out. I feel it feels like there's a little less separation here. Now that could be resolution. No, actually that isn't resolution because we're looking at 3.2K images through both of these. So it's really fascinating. And keep in mind, master primes are I still think they're the best high-speed Super 35 lenses available today, but they are 15-year-old technology. So I think it's really interesting that they're still relevant, and that's actually what we try to do. I mean, we're hoping that, the product manager I work with, he says he wants the signature primes to be the new super speeds. He wants them to be around in 20 years and still going out on jobs. But there is a lot of interesting separation going on in here. I see a lot more detail and texture. So yeah, they're really fascinating, and I think these lenses are really good for different things. If you really want to shoot at 1.3, then and you need to work at those light levels, then I think the Master Prime and Super 35 is a great choice. If you can work slightly brighter light levels, then and you're shooting either large format or Super 35, I think the signature primes do some really interesting things. Now here's what I was really seeing on the sensor, because I shot open gate on both of these. And then there's the 15. So it's a really interesting lens. And the 12, I actually have a 12. I need to get out and shoot more with it. It's with the 12, you really need a lot of depth. And I need to try to find this location again and shoot it with the 12, because I really want to get something interesting in the foreground and then see how everything trails off into the background, because they're very rectilinear lenses. And it's interesting because when you say that, maybe to some people it sounds a little boring, but this combination of attributes is really fascinating, because you've got rectilinear, high resolution, the warmth, but skin still looks great. And it's just very immersive. If you look at this in UHD, it's really stunning. It's just very different. I've never seen anything like it. All right, so that's most of the new stuff. I've got some actually shot with a master macro, which covers LF, which is really interesting. I've got some of that, but I've been talking a long time. Anyone else? Any questions?
Yeah. So, ARRI is a brand that we've invested heavily in on the large format, the Alexa LF, the Mini LF, signature primes. I know a lot of other rental houses, who are our clients, have done the same. And even those who haven't, have come to rely on Dynamic to be able to provide that, that gear. We've got account reps and, as Sean mentioned, in Denmark, we've got an office in UK. And so we're really focusing on that global market. I guess my question is, do you see a demand for full frame continuing to increase as ARRI releases the 4K Super 35 camera? Or do you kind of equate it to, apples and oranges? Because with the release of Super 35, obviously you've got the signature primes, which will still be paired nicely with it. But I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on the evolution of full frame with the release of a Super 35 camera.
I think it'll still be relevant. It's hard to say, because things fashions come and go. I think people are excited about large format right now because it is such a different look, and even if it is as simple as for the same camera placement and the angle of view, you get half the depth of field. It's really simple, but the effect is really profound at the same time. There's also some interesting things you can do where, with other lenses, you can kind of explore the outsides of their illumination circle. And I've seen people doing that with older lenses and really getting some funky effects around the edges. So I think it'll be relevant for a while. I think for us, it's more about, bringing out a new sensor to the market, meeting a certain amount of demand, because there are people who still want to focus on Super 35 and UHD 4K and use their older lenses. And it's also the first big change in sensor design in 10 years. So I think there's probably a benefit in starting small. Because if you think about it, a lot of people ask, like, when is ARRI coming out with a dual gain camera? And they forget that all of our cameras are dual gain. from the beginning. We're taking a high gain and a low gain feed out of every photo site, and we're blending them, and that's where a lot of the dynamic, a lot of the dynamic range that we're known for comes from, but also gives us extra the extra ability to really roll off highlights and to really push the noise floor down. But it's really difficult to do because you're now taking 2 raw images out of the back of the sensor all the time. And as far as I know, nobody else does that. So, you know, I think there's demand, and I also think it's trying to kind of wade into a completely new redesign that's probably going to be the basis for all of our cameras going forward without biting off too much. We probably could have tried to come out with an 8K camera, but I know what goes into these sensors, and we just don't let stuff go out half-baked. So the sensor's been in development for a long time, and our team just wouldn't let it out the door until they were happy with it. And it's been, you know, a little painful at times, but that's if we start releasing stuff that doesn't work the way people expect, then that's a big hit to our reputation, and that's what we're known for.
Yeah, absolutely. No, ARRI's definitely known for being extremely thorough and methodical in terms of the release of their products, which has been great. And that's why, you know, we're here. That's why we have your products. So we appreciate that.
And we try to make them last too. So that's another big component, because we're still selling original Alexas. You know, we're still fixing those up and selling them. So the commitment to past products is solid. And especially with the optics, you know, we're still making ultra primes. That's a 25-year-old optical design, but it's a really solid workhorse lens. And master primes, you know, for Super 35, you kind of can't beat them right now, I don't think. But, you know, and so we keep making them. But that's just how we think. We want this stuff to last forever.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, our biggest problem was Super 35 versus large format. And I still think it will be a problem when things go back to normal. You know, rental houses that we speak to, and of course, we only speak to rental houses, and we speak to rental houses all over the world. People were reluctant to invest in large format because they have got such a large inventory of Super 35 glass. Will ARRI announce soon, like when we can expect? I know you've said 2021, but is there any, we make it a bit clearer? Or will you also like release the Super 35 mode for the Mini LF sooner, so that again people can make an investment? Because investments going forward, there's going to be a lot more thought that goes into each and every investment.
Right. The Super 35 mode for the LF or the Mini LF, you know, I think it was supposed to come out shortly. I don't think we're still on track with that because of COVID. The camera is still on track, which is good. But, you know, we're trying to make a lot, you know, do a lot with a little right now. What's interesting is people think ARRI is a really, really big company, and it's not. We're just very, very, very focused. So you'll have other cameras where the cinema division is, you know, this much of the overall company. And other than a small medical division that I think we're now partnered with someone else on managing that, ARRI is completely oriented towards the film industry. So there's a lot of other manufacturers that can pull from other divisions, like, you know, from, you know, still camera technology, and use sensor advancements or, you know, optical advancements they find over there. We can't really do that. We're working from scratch, but we're always trying to work beyond what our competitors are doing, because at the same time, they are a small part of a larger entity, and this is all we do. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I would like all this stuff to come faster myself, but you know, with the virus and the way things are going, I think a lot of the resources are we're keeping the camera on track. The software might be pushed out a little bit longer, but we're not going to let it go. But we have to allocate the resources we have.
Sure. I mean, every conversation I have with every single person is about this camera, and you know, like they're gonna have to be careful with their money. And I definitely think if people have more of an idea of when they can see that camera, they can plan their capex or what's left of it accordingly.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
some feedback for you guys. I'm sure you get it all the time, but I hear it every single day.
Right. No, we hear it too, but you know, we're budgeting as well. So, and it's difficult. We just can't let stuff go out unless it's rock solid, and that just makes things take a lot longer that way.
Sure.
But,
and we'll appreciate that. It makes
so, I mean, at the same time, whatever they buy, you know, in 10 years, we'll still support it. So,
yeah. Another question I had going back to the signatures and just LF in general, like what came first, the signatures or the original Alexa LF, and what prompted you to go into LF if you're still continuing to make new Super 35 products? It's obviously not an evolution that you're leaving behind. So like why and when did that first happen?
You know, I wasn't with the company when that happened, but based on what I know that originally ARRI Rental said there was demand for the Alexa 65, and there was a lot of skepticism initially. So, but ARRI Rental said, well, if you make it, we'll pay for it, but then we get the exclusive rights to it. Okay, well, you know, the cameras got made and they took off like a rocket. So I think there was a sense that there was room for the sales side to make an intermediate camera, because the 65 is, I mean, it's an amazing camera, but that's 6K uncompressed ARRI RAW all the time, and that's a real commitment. Even LF, you know, ARRI RAW is a little bit of a commitment too, but there was the opportunity to also put in ProRes and things like that. So I just think we saw an opportunity in large format, and I think we saw that trend accelerating. I mean, I remember when the Monstro first came out, a rental house that I worked with quite a lot, VideoFax in San Francisco. They bought some, they ran out and bought some Sigmas. And I asked them why the Sigmas, and they said, we've invested so much in the last few years in really great Super 35 glass, and now we've got this large format camera coming out. We need to figure out what to do. So it was an interesting conundrum, and because they saw demand take off like a rocket just for something new. And I think cinematographers are always looking for something that's new and different and something to experiment with. So I think we saw the LF trend coming. We were a little bit behind the curve, but once again, that's just because we're doing things a little bit differently, and we're pushing twice as much data out the back. It's a bigger sensor. Everything had to be, you know, perfect. And then of course we released the first camera, the Alexa LF, with the mindset that, you know, why wouldn't we give everyone every option that we can possibly give them right out of the gate? And you know, and then of course we were quickly asked, when's the smaller version coming out? Because this does all this amazing stuff, but it's bigger than we've come to expect. So,
sure. And where does ARRI see LF sit in the market? Is it a premium product for bigger productions? Is it just a different flavor and a different look, as you know, spherical anamorphic is, or where do you guys see it as a, you know, you've created it, like where do you see it?
You know, I don't know that we have, you know, it's hard to say that because, you know, up until about a year and a half ago, I was a freelance DP, and I didn't really see any, you know, stratification as far as where large format would be used, because I used to shoot commercials and corporate marketing projects and visual effects and stuff like that. And it was just an aesthetic choice. It's not really a big production thing anymore. You know, I shoot little, you know, 10-person crew corporate talking head things with large format cameras.
Sure, but there's a cost implication, of course. The products cost more and thus cost more to rent, and there's more data and that kind of stuff. And I just wondered if, because originally, you know, I was saying that it's just a different flavor. You've got anamorphic, you've got spherical, and then you've got full frame. And then of course everyone starts releasing full frame anamorphics, and it kind of blew my analogy out of the water, but I think that kind of answers it. Austin, I think we've got a couple of questions on the chat.
Yeah, I saw a couple come through. Looks like Gaston Fazio Gaston is from HD House in Miami. He gives everybody a hello and a welcome. He's asking a similar, kind of right along the lines of what we're talking about, is ARRI working on full frame, VistaVision, anamorphic lenses. Not sure how much you can divulge there, but
I cannot comment on our future product roadmap. That's about all I can say.
Okay, fair enough. And then we had another one, Gerard Botha. He asked about, will ARRI be addressing the color difference in multicam shoots? The sensors haven't matched in color as per a single camera in the new sensor, as was experienced in the historic Alexa range. Not sure. Difficult questions all around.
I can answer that one. So I apologize for the dog here. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
And he goes on right now. It must be the mailman come by. So all our cameras are calibrated in a very. Oh my goodness. Maybe I should mute myself. And Art, you chime in right now until my dog stops. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't know what you're going to say. So.
This is the new age. You know, we're used to this. This is the modern day. Somebody poking their head in, saying, "Hey, so and so's on the line. Can you take it?"
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've got 2 dogs here, and if the doorbell rings, it's all over. So.
Yeah. Okay, so he stopped now. So basically, there are slight little differences, because you have to realize when you do a multicam shoot, you're taking cameras that are different years old. One might be 5 years old, one might be new. You know, sensors also age over time. You know, so there's if they're not all freshly calibrated, you will find a little bit difference. And one is more green, so there's slight little difference. And also what most people don't realize, they will use different lenses. Sometimes they use different NDs, and every single thing that is different on another camera, you don't realize, oh, there is a slight difference there. Now, how the heck are the sensors not showing me the same colors? Plus they're pointing from a different direction. There might be a different lights. I mean, I've seen so many ways where when you strip everything down and you take the same lens, and you take the same lens to the same camera, these differences, they kind of pan out. Yes, little difference they remain, but there is also an order white balance. There is a green magenta shift, where if you have calibrated monitors, and that's also another key, you can tweak these things to be the same. And in multicam specifically, I think, where you can route different cameras to the same monitors, you have a way to tweak these things remotely. So I hope that answers that one question. And I apologize for the dog.
Yeah, if you have a parade waveform on the set, and you can run all the cameras through that, and you can dial that in really, really quickly. I used to do that a lot in well, with single camera stuff. When I'd go into a location that had just crazy weird, like, you know, green fluorescence or, you know, warm whites or something, and I had to match my other lights to it, I would white balance the camera to a white reference under that light, and then I'd take another light, like a tungsten light or an LED, and I'd light up that white card and look at Parade RGB, because now I've white balanced the camera under that ambient light. So all in Parade RGB, all the peaks line up, red, green, and blue. And then I aim the light I want to add in at that white card. The peaks are off, and then I'd either gel or manipulate the LEDs until all the peaks are aligned again, and then I have a metameric match. So I'd always be on top of my assistants, like, I need the camera up now. Put a lens on. I don't care. I got to do this at the beginning of every shoot. After a while, I had a little log of what worked, but you can match cameras the same way. You know, pick one reference and then, you know, run all the other ones through the waveform, and, you know, look at it on the same monitor and just, you know, kind of do that tweaking.
I wanted to quickly make a little comment about, because the request was always regarding this new camera that's coming next year. Just so you're aware of, the camera will come with an LPL mount. And since the signature primes will work on Super 35 and on large format, it's a beautiful choice that can be used in both worlds. You know, obviously with a more cropped area of that imager, but that's something most people don't realize. If this is glass that's designed right now, it's meant to last, and it's designed for the future, also for HDR, as Art mentioned before. And again, there are a lot of lenses out there today, and many more manufacturers that used to be in this still lens business, right? So what they're doing now, they're rehousing these lenses. They give you the cinema outside gear mechanics, but optically, these lenses are still breeding. They're not cinema lenses. They don't correct for breeding. They don't correct for distortions, because in a still world, you would focus, shoot, take a one shot, and you didn't care that the field of view changes on you when you kind of focus on a different format. So I think from the point of a rental house being aware of these different criteria of what really defines a cinema lens, I think that's where a lot of education has to come in. You know, obviously the creative process or the creative choice is always the DP's choice, right? So sometimes you want a software lens that falls off. Sometimes you want distortion because you want to enhance a certain look. But in that sense, I think, the signature primes are built for the future, you know, for today and going forward.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting and a very good point to clarify in terms of understanding what products were designed for, you know, what the signature primes were actually designed for, you know, cinema lenses for cinema application. So that's, thank you, Günter. That's fantastic. I did have a question. I know that you can't, you know, release a roadmap of lenses. You know, we've already asked about full frame, you know, anamorphic. So I won't ask the pointed question, but I do want to ask if you've done any zoom tests, tests with zooms from other manufacturers that match or at least possibly complement the signature primes. So for instance, if a DP were to make a creative choice about using the signature primes, but they needed a zoom lens, you know, have you done any tests in terms of, you know, matching, you know, between Angenieux, Fuji, Zeiss, anything else?
Not directly, but there's a reason for that, and I can't say anything about it.
Okay.
We can tell from your smile.
Fair enough.
Hopefully, we'll have something to share with you a little later in the.
I had a lot more direct questions. Brandon, you hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
We'll have two of them.
All right. So what else can I talk about?
I'll fill the awkward silence.
Please do.
We're coming up right on an hour here. We try to be mindful of everybody's time, and this has been a very productive conversation. I'll ask a follow-up question that we got from Gaston Fazio, and then we can maybe ask another question or do one more internally here and get you guys and our audience on their way. But he asked, can we expect HDE on camera at some point? Will the Super 35 Mini be able to do this? Again,
we don't really know a ton about the new camera. I mean,
yes, I mean, I assume the new Mini will also have this high density encoding option, and I think the question relates as to, can this be done on camera? And I think this is probably not possible. I think that there's just a patent issue there at play. That's as far as what I know. So I think we will always write uncompressed to the drives. Then when you take this drive off, and you transfer it, your computer, will use the processing power to compress this and save 40% of data. So it's more like a storage question for offsite rather than saving storage in camera.
I will say I've seen footage from the prototypes, and it's an ARRI camera.
Very good.
Most definitely.
Very good. Anything else that you guys want to discuss, or any other questions?
I have a quick one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Something that we haven't spoken about a lot on this, our dynamic series that we're doing, is all of the little toys and bebobs that are out there right now. And ARRI, you guys make some of my favorite ones with your stabilizers and all the gimbals and all the accessories. Is there anything big in the works in terms of your gimbals or the 3-axis?
There's the SRH 360. I don't know a ton about it right now, but Günter, do you know?
Yes, the SRH 360 is basically an upgrade to the SRH 3, and it basically adds a slip ring. That means you're no longer limited to the, I think it was 360 degrees, maybe it was 400, because it was all cable based. Now they're adding a slip ring, which means you can actually turn any way you want to. So this is an upgrade that will be offered to existing SRH3 customers. And I think you can also order SRH 360s right now. The only thing is, I'm not sure due to COVID what the delivery ETA is.
Fair enough. We're all juggling the virus and its impacts, and just trying to make the best of the situation. And I think in a lot of ways, that's one of the reasons why we're grateful, is we probably wouldn't be having this conversation today, and learning more about, you guys and the background, and some hints to the roadmap without giving away too many details. But it's all a benefit to the community, right? And us really serving the rental house community so that they can serve the production community, get them and the tools and resources that they need to go out and shoot their wonderful projects. And it's a circle, because then we get to go home and watch it and consume it and continue all over again. So we're very grateful to have you guys here today. It's a very fun, productive conversation and learning about the products in the future. And we really appreciate both of your time joining us for Dynamic Speaker Series. So we're looking forward to staying in touch.
Good. Thanks for having us. And if anyone has questions, I'm at lenses@arri.com. Easy to find. So
cool.
Just, bug me as needed.
Yes, thank you so much. And also thanks Dynamic Rentals for being such a great customer. We always, if you guys have any issues, you all have my email. Feel free to reach out anytime. And thanks again for having us.
Thank you.
Günter, thanks for joining us again. And Art, it was great having you. So we really appreciate everyone who joined today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, guys.
See you guys.